Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, let me start with a remark, with a heartfelt thanks for all the speeches and panels that we heard this morning, for the discussions and remarks that deeply impressed and thrilled me. I was really deeply impressed by your efforts and activities. This is what freedom, what the fight for freedom, for equal rights, for democracy is all about. Thank you so much. Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, es ist mir eine große Ehre, heute vor Ihnen. It's a great privilege for me to speak to you today, to speak to people who are working for democracy, for human rights, for freedom all over the world. And it's a fantastic message to have this first Freedom Conference in Berlin, in a city, as we have heard when the Governor Mayor spoke, a city which, after 12 years of National Socialist tyranny, spent years being an island of freedom, surrounded by a dictatorship, defended and enabled by the United States, the United Kingdom and France. And after that, Berlin was a place of freedom, fought for by the people, which had made the wall between East and West come tumbling down with a lot of personal commitment. And to all of you, my deepest respect for your personal work and struggle for freedom all over the world. There are still many walls in this world, behind which there are authoritarian systems of repression which we need to bring down with commitment, with courage. And to do that, it needs people like you. According to the Democracy Index, only 15% of the world's population live in a flourishing democracy. Almost 40% live in a dictatorship. So is the Assembly today a meeting, a discussion by minorities, for minorities? I disagree. Because the survey mentioned tries to describe a state, not the longings of almost all people in the world. And the core of this longing is the idea of living a self-determined life in freedom. This longing is the beginning of any freedom, any constitutional democracy. And freedom is not an abstract philosophical term. Freedom begins with self-efficacy. This is true for a dictatorship. The experience of self-efficacy is a necessary beginning of a freedom movement. The willingness, the desire to have an impact. But it's true in democracies as well. Here, freedom has to be seen as a genuine empowerment and not simply formal rights. Last week, I had the honor to give a speech in St. Paul's Church in Frankfurt, which is the venue of the first democratically elected parliament in Germany. And there's a plaque on the wall. And on this is the name Amartya Sen, somebody who was awarded the Peace Prize in St. Paul's Church. He got the Nobel Prize for Economics, and he spoke of development as freedom. And for him, freedom consists in capabilities, the actual ability to shape your own life. And then, as a secondary concern, this is about much more than political rights. It's about access to education for men and women, access to public spaces, media, economic life. And that is why for us, as the savings and loan associations, having an account for everyone is a central part of the founding idea of our organization and has been since our existence. Access to join economic life, irrespective of origin, education, income, assets, political ideology. It's about having the opportunity to create your own life, to be creative, to love and to shape what is happening. And that should be open to everyone, no exceptions. Empirically, too, we know satisfaction, health and democracy are growing in those countries where people feel they have control over their own lives. The self-determination theory in economics, which Daisy and Richard Ryan postulated, developed a basic model. And 3 needs are responsible for our psychological well-being: autonomy, the sense of deciding yourselves; competence, the experience to have an impact; and relatedness, the knowledge that we are not alone. And therefore, freedom may, first of all, be the absence of coercion, but it is more than that. It is the presence of creative force. Or, shorter, freedom is a space of empowerment. It is on the basis of these personal competences to act that democracy emerges, and not the other way around. Creating a space where every single individual has the opportunity to create something. That is the central job. And that's also the founding idea of our savings and loan institutions. And today we summarize this by saying we make it simple for people to shape their own lives. Our contribution is to offer access to economic life, financial education, to be able to set up a company, to be self-determined in economic life, and to be able to generate your own income and property. So it's not about state welfare, it's about help to self-help, about enabling self-empowerment. This is the basis of freedom. Democracy confers rights, but only self-efficacy creates the belief that you can use these rights. And we try to carry this idea into the world. Our Savings and Loan Foundation for International Cooperation, since its inception in 1991, has been active in more than 250 projects across 100 countries. These projects concern primarily financial education, the funding of micro companies, often by groups of women, rural funding projects, the development of regional institutes, and green finance. And our experience from that is financial empowerment creates participation. From financial participation, you derive participation, and participation creates self-confidence, and self-confidence creates more than prosperity, but an awareness of shaping political processes and a right to do so. Now, when I started, I talked about the flourishing democracies, existing democracies, of which there are only 25. These are the Nordic countries, Canada, Australia, Germany as well. By the way, the US no longer counts as one. Even in the so-called perfect democracies, freedom may erode. And that includes Germany. Why is it that even in a democracy, more and more people are willing to follow political ideologies which oppose plurality, oppose democratic processes, oppose equal rights and respect for people of different persuasions? I think this too has something to do with self-efficacy, or, to be more precise, with not really experiencing or being convinced of self-efficacy. An important factor is complexity, fast technological change, increasingly large political units, including the European Union, ever more complex context, bureaucracy, which is no longer comprehensive. These are all obstacles to self-efficacy, preventing people to live a self-determined life. They prevent an understanding of what is happening, and they create feelings of vulnerability, helplessness. These are all problems of our democracy. Having fair elections is only of limited importance here, because many people either don't go and vote, or they vote for enemies of democracy. And this is why I believe even Western democracies need to work on the self-efficacy of their own citizens. This is possible by strengthening decentralized structures, such as communal self-administration, by promoting mid-sized businesses, respecting cultural differences, and that leads us to different solutions, particularly through reducing bureaucracy. But I will not ignore the fact that democratic awareness is flanked by a credible prosperity promise, because prosperity for all can only be obtained in a democracy. It's not a guarantee, but at least a fair opportunity exists for all men and women. Without opening this perspective of prosperity, even a democracy will have problems in the long run. And that is why for Europe, for Germany, for the West, it's so important to increase competitiveness and resilience against autocracy and self-defense capabilities, because what Anne Applebaum calls the axis of autocrats is getting more organized. China, Russia, US. George Orwell, in his novel 1984, didn't just describe a police state. He also described the three nuclear superpowers which were dividing the world among themselves. Eurasia, focusing on Russia, then America and Oceania with China as the focal point. And this may not remain a dystopia. It might become a reality unless we oppose it. And therefore Europe has to be a voice of freedom. And this voice has to be so loud that it doesn't become an economic, digital, a political colony of so-called superstates. I think we share an interest in that. To have countries developing in economic and political sense, to have self-efficacy, that is something people want all over the world. And I think that's the unifying thought of the day and also our mandate. Let me try and put it together like this. Freedom doesn't start with a constitution or with elections. Freedom begins in the heart of people, their souls, of people who can say, I can do this, and what I do matters. And this is also true for countries wishing to be permanently free. They just have to trust themselves to do it and to defend or regain their self-efficacy. Long live freedom. Thank you.